What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gathering the Kings podcast. I am your host, Chaz Wolf. I'm a serial entrepreneur across franchising, construction, real estate, and online education. My mission with this show is to transfer courage to you, our listeners, by sharing the real and raw stories of successful entrepreneurs, even 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners. Today, we are joined by Tony Lamb, the owner and CEO of Kona Ice, Travelin Tom's coffee truck, and Beverly Ann's cookie truck. Tony went from selling vacuums to building the largest food truck company in the world. But what's truly remarkable about Tony isn't just the success, it's the journey and the heart behind his businesses. Tony's companies have been able to give back over $130 million to communities. So, how has Tony managed to achieve such incredible success, also while creating an amazing franchisee culture? We'll find out today. We discuss 3 key things. 1, the realities of growing and scaling Kona Ice, and how Tony actually did it.
I can do this until I get it off the ground. Those things all added up to me taking a swing.
2, is everyone able to be an entrepreneur?
I never want to discourage anybody. I always want to be the encourager in saying this. Sure. But listen, you got to know who you are.
And 3, the difference between being an entrepreneur and a small business owner.
Small business and entrepreneur, 2 different things, completely.
If you want to learn what it takes to grow one of the largest companies, you're in the right place. Stick around. This is one episode you won't want to miss. What's up, Tony? So glad that you're here, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, Chaz. I really am.
Well, welcome to the King stage. This is going to be a fun conversation, not only just because of your background. I mean, literally, your background here on the screen says so much about your brand, about your personality. But Tony, you're the largest food truck company in the world.
Yeah. I did not know that was a thing until I had some partners did some research and came back and said, you're the biggest in the world. And I was like, you mean weight? And but no, it's not this. I think the second place guy is me with coffee, and the third place guy is way down there. There was a company out of Australia that had quite a bit, but they have not done well. I think they got to 400 or 500. I think Mr. Softy back in the day was 400 or 500 back in the day, but they're no longer to any size or any scale at this point. So,
what do you think is? I mean, that's like just a very obvious, stark gap between 1,700 plus and the next guy that's maybe got a couple hundred. It's just like night and day. What would your response be to what the heck?
I'm really good.
I mean, you gotta be.
No, I don't know. No, I think really trying to understand the business model and what it is, and really lean into it. I think a lot of people that do food truck and a lot of people that they do it as a bolt-on to brick and mortar, or they do food truck trying to get to brick and mortar. And you see that happen a lot. And I've always said, just lean in and be the absolute best at food truck, and not think about brick and mortar. I've had so many people come to me and say, let's brick and mortar Kona Ice, let's brick and mortar Tom's, let's, all these different things. And I'm like, no, it's not where really my expertise lies. It's not really where we have the competitive advantage. So let's do it. Let's do it amazing in the space that we're in.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot to that that you just slightly identified for us, and we're going to get to that. I want to know a little bit about your backdrop first, because I'm a millennial, and so your background, I'm going to get to here in a second, but I'm familiar with it. But there are people listening here today, millennials or maybe even younger, that don't even know that you once not only had to push a vacuum back and forth, but that you didn't buy it from Amazon.
Right.
So I got to hear, you sold vacuums door to door. I'm familiar with this industry. It was, super prevalent in door to door sales. But Tony, the vacuum, come on, give us some. How did this work for you? I mean, you're obviously successful.
I don't think I had a choice. My dad was a vacuum cleaner salesman my whole life, and I thought everyone aspired to be a vacuum cleaner salesman. That was the
pinnacle.
It was the pinnacle, brother. That's how you arrive. I said that one time. I said, I had buddies that dads were doctors or lawyers, and they didn't live in a nicest house as we did, or my dad drove a nicer car. And I'm like, okay, that's here on the level, and I want to be above that, so I'll sell vacuum cleaners. And obviously, I got into college, start taking some classes. I'm trying not to be a vacuum cleaner salesman. I get out in the summer and I start doing it, just to cut my teeth because I've just had it in the blood for so long, and I was just really, lucky and did real well at it. And then by the time I graduated college, there was no job out there going to pay me what I was making selling vacuum cleaners. And I thought, I went to a job interview and I thought, yes, it's pharmaceutical sales, and I'm going to take my sales experience, take this one chemistry class I had in college and this degree, and I'm going to sell pharmaceuticals. And the guy said, "You'll make $36,000 a year." And of course, this is back in '92 or whatever, and I was like, "Ugh, I'm already making that in the summer selling vacuum cleaners, so I'm going to have to." I left that interview on UK's campus and drove to the Lexington Rainbow Vacuum Cleaner office and said, "What's the highest commission you'll pay me?" and went to work.
Yeah, I love that. Just that free, cap. I mean, that's really what sales and even and then eventually entrepreneurship is about, right? It's, I don't want to be put in a bubble. And so for you as vacuums, for me, it was, a plethora of things, the insurance and advertising and all the things that I sold as a youngster. But for you, it was a college degree, but you looking back, if you were in sales, you didn't use it. And then I think you've got some preferences on that towards now even your own children. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, good research, Chaz. No, my kids, of course, went down the road. They got out of high school. They'd done well, and they were going to go into college. They went into college, took some classes, but yet Kona was thriving. I'm watching some of the things they're doing, and they're working here. And there just really wasn't anything. And listen, I'm a big fan of college for a professional degree, accounting degree, medical, whatever. I'm not probably a big fan of a very expensive college degree that it has a job that won't service the debt that you incurred to get that college degree. And I think a lot of people are kind of coming to terms with that. And so maybe I was a little bit in front of my time, but none of my kids have a college education, but they're all doing extremely well. And I say that, I think they've had an education the 4 years after high school, but a lot of it was working in Kona or I've got two daughters that are in video and photography, and they do incredibly well. Outside of Kona, they do incredibly well. And I get excited about that because it's not the traditional path, but you're seeing more people being able to, wrangle a career, so to speak, and wrangle a living without the formal education, but it's all, for me, it's also the indebtedness. That's what worries me. I think that's why I'd be a good entrepreneur, because I've always managed my debt, my personal debt load very well.
Yeah, I think that there's a commonality. Obviously, your history and then what you're helping your kids with is different, but there's commonality. So I want to pull out some nuggets there for the listener. You selling vacuums, or your kids growing up in your business, and now even doing their own things a little bit, it sounds like. What are the commonalities that the listener can take away from, whether it's them particular, maybe feeling less than because they're not college educated, or maybe it's they're thinking about their kids and going, I don't really agree with this, but I don't really know. What are the skill sets? What are the things that you got from selling vacuums, or what are your kids getting now that are way more important than the paper?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just life. Listen, I think I've said this before. I speak to a lot of universities and I speak to a lot of high schools. I like high schools better, like FBLA groups and things like that. These are younger kids getting ready for college or whatever, and they've got all these preconceived ideas of what it's supposed to be like. And my thoughts on that is, listen, you're just at the starting gate. Life is about learning, and it never stops. And you don't get to a point where you're so knowledgeable that you don't have to consume knowledge anymore. I'm 55 years old, and I consume knowledge, like a starving man. The podcasts, the books, the everything I can get my hands on, getting to conferences, getting around people. I love getting around smart people and just gleaning from them and seeing what I can pull off of it. And so when I look at that, I had a buddy that was introduced himself one time. We were in a business together, and they said, well, where did you go to school? I said, I went to the University of Kentucky. And then he kind of manipulated the conversation to where he didn't have to answer the fact that he didn't have a college education. And I thought to myself, mistake, because it's the smartest guy I've ever been around. I mean, to this day, probably still one of the smartest guys I've been around. And he didn't make it all the way through college. And so that stigma of, and I think it's evaporating just a little bit, because it comes down to how many followers do you have? That's the new college education. How many followers do you have, brother? How much content are you producing? Which is fine. Listen, I love the evolution. I don't want to be the guy that's just stuck in a rut that's like, oh, this is the way we used to do it. man, get me around some young, smart people and let me find out what they're doing. And I think this is exciting, but that stigma of not having a college education, my gosh, I hope it's leaving. And I hope it's leaving quickly, because it's not about that. It's about the learning that you consume and how you get out there and use the thing that you've learned. I say that with a little hesitation, because I think education can also be brutal sometimes. It can be, what you don't know. And that's what I loved about the formal part of it, was like getting in there and just getting overwhelmed. I remember accounting just used to kick my tail. And the first couple years was easy. I was actually majoring in accounting at one time, and then, took a high-level accounting class. It's like, oh my gosh, it's killing me. And I remember
spinning you off the planet.
Yeah. And I love the butt whooping of that. I mean, I did. Yeah. I really did.
Even into entrepreneurship, you're talking about, conferences and getting around people. Obviously, Gathering the Kings is a mastermind of high-level entrepreneurs. This is why it exists, is because when you have a little bit of a humble spirit, especially as an entrepreneur, around wanting to continue to learn and wanting to continue to get around other people who have different perspectives, even listening to this podcast, they're going to get your perspective. They'd never heard it before. That is growing, right? And maybe a little bit of a butt whooping. At the end of the day, that's kind of how we change. It's either the what we're going towards that we're motivated to go get, or it's the fear of what we're running from. And sometimes we just got to hear it from somebody else, and we're like, wow. Or read it in a book, or in a class, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, was it Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA? He just spoke to the Stanford class. He's a Stanford grad, and I've listened to him for years, because he's this real humble guy. But he just, I think 30 days ago, and I've got it earmarked on my computer, he spoke to the graduating class of Stanford. He said, you obviously come from means, because you just went to one of the greatest schools. Right. You're around great people. You're at this elevated level. So all I can hope for you is pain and suffering. I want you to have pain and suffering, because the growth that comes from pain and suffering is the greatest growth, and it's the stuff that sustains you. And I so believe in that, and I kind of lean in for pain and suffering. Let's start another brand, because Kona was running so smoothly and not almost autopilot. We're selling a couple hundred franchises, a year, and things are great. And it's like, let's mix it up. And then COVID.
That was its own pain and suffering.
Yeah. God had a different plan in mind, and whatever that was. I mean, that was some external pain and suffering that you didn't anticipate. But I like starting new brands. I like pushing the envelope on what we're doing now, because we're just in this niche by ourselves. And I like the continual butt whooping. So.
Yeah, that's growth-minded, ness. It's we've got this phrase inside of Gathering the Kings. It's grateful but not done. The ability to sit for a second, be humble, and go like, wow, like I've really gotten a lot from either my success or my failures, but I'm still, and I'm thankful for it, but I'm still heading up. There's still more to do. There's more agitation. There's more potential.
Right.
I want to get to some of those sticky points for you, but your kind of beginning piece here of how you even started the brand was a little unique. I think your daughter had a unique experience with ice cream.
Yeah, it was real simple. It's just, we moved into a new subdivision. Ice cream truck comes around the corner. My kids instinctively run to it. It's a disaster when we get there. The guy's fresh out of prison. He's selling high-end, or not high-end, good Lord, very expensive products off the truck, and I'm very tickled by it. I laughed a lot during this experience as my kids buy $22 worth of freezer burn ice cream, and he drives away. And I guarantee you, and I've said this, if he turns around and comes back, my kids scream again for it. And I'm like, well, what is in these kids' DNA that they understand this? And so when that hit me, and of course, as an entrepreneur, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I don't say that braggadociously, I say that almost as a confessional. Hi, I'm Tony Lamb, and I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah. It's not anything.
I'm right there with you. I'm in the same circle. We're in the same class. We got to keep each other accountable.
Yeah, it's not something to be really super proud of. And of course, you're talking to people that have made it, but a lot of people, and even me until this point, had not made it as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of great small business owners, Chaz, and that's commendable. but the entrepreneur part of it, the spin. But let me get back to the origin story. Was, for several weeks actually, I just kept pinging my wife and people that I knew. What if a truck would come through your neighborhood and it was phenomenal? What if it was clean and welcoming and the driver was uniformed and you felt safe with it and the product was reasonable and the experience was phenomenal, and people were very well received it, and I was like, I'm going to do it. And I mean, I just talked about it for 2 years, and I had a lot of window time with what I was doing currently. At the time I was doing some marketing consulting, so I was driving a lot, so I just thought about it a lot. I would take notes, and I remember one day I was heading to Louisville, Kentucky, about an hour and a half drive, and I thought, I'm going to think about the marketing, the initial marketing of Caribbean Ice. We called it Caribbean Ice in prototype. Too many R's, too many B's. I was looking for a shorter name. So I said, I'm going to think about the marketing. And I remember just taking my mind and turning it there. And for an hour and a half, I thought nothing about how do I market this outside of just driving it through streets.
Right.
And so, it's 2000, was a 4 or 5, something like that. There wasn't, Facebook wasn't around, these kind of things. So how do you market it? How do you penetrate? And so that was fun for me. And then I remember sitting in a restaurant with a buddy of mine, and we talking about it, and he said, well, we've talked this thing to death. Either you do it or you don't. And I said, I'm going to do it. And it just came out of my mouth, Jazz. And I was like, oh, crap, I just said that. So I got to do it. But I had some residual income, so I think that made it very easy for me to leave. I have no debt. I'm a very debt avoidant guy, no personal debt. So I thought, hey, I've got a lot of flexibility. Even though I had 4 kids, they're in a little Christian school. I didn't have car payments. I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything that was just bearing me down. Tuition was about the greatest thing that was. But I thought, I can do this. I've got some residual. I can do this until I get it off the ground. And that was. Those things all added up to me taking a swing.
Yeah,
it worked.
I love that was the calculation to take the swing, right? It was, all these months, probably potentially even a couple of years, like you said, of thinking and getting research and planning things out. I loved how you said it wasn't just this, like this idea that kind of just kept coming to you. It became an obsession, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is how you described it.
Yeah.
And so what we obsess over is typically what we get.
Well, I think it's a little dangerous too, because I think the obsession, you have to be very contrarian in that. You've got to take a couple days and step back and say, let's look at this from a different lens. And I've tried to find people that would shoot holes in it. And then when you get to the point, you're like, no one's really shooting holes in this thing, and the holes that they're trying to shoot just don't add up, and I can overcome this and I can overcome that. I mean, listen, the big hole was the stigma. And the big hole was that industry's dying, and the big holes they were shooting was like, no one thinks about the ice cream truck anymore. For me, and what I saw in my own kids was this, I'm like, I think it's still there. I think, yes, you go one more generation, there's no ice cream trucks. It's just, we're not going to allow people to drive through our neighborhoods, I say fresh out of prison. Yeah. Not that there's not great people that are fresh out of prison. I'm just saying that, just that look, that feel, you're not going to let it happen continuously, and it's going to just drive it out. So I thought it was the right time, the niche was open, and let's go.
So you said your van is clean, it's obviously colorful, the driver is uniformed, like all these things that you built because it's the opposite of what you experienced that day with the ice cream truck man. And I've got a vision in my mind here of the white van. It's kind of beat up, the side door kind of opens, he's got this big old kind of rusted freezer,
right? And
he's throwing out, $12 Snicker bars, and it's like, geez, I everything you described, I've experienced. I think everybody listening probably has experienced, but yet that little bell goes off, and you're like, oh, it's the ice cream truck,
right?
But I want to segue into the brand, because I think that obviously did an amazing job, but how can this correlate to the person listening right now who maybe is beginning, maybe they're in the first couple of years and they're trying to set themselves apart? How much did that make a difference when we're talking about the way that your truck looked, the position of the colors, the name, the uniformed driver? Like, a lot of people maybe don't think these things are important anymore because when you go to McDonald's, it's just all sloppy today. How much does it actually matter still?
Yeah, but if you look at the people that are doing it incredibly well, and just the little nuances of maybe like a Chick-fil-A, where the customer service is at another level, and so, listen, and that's the problem with being an entrepreneur, is because you're obsessive and you go through this thing. If you don't have that other lens where you're trying to say, okay, what's the problem? What makes us? What differentiates us? What makes us to where we can have a market, be a market leader in this? I don't want to make another hamburger. I don't want to make another pizza. There's too many great people doing it. I'm very competitive, but I don't want to go up against those guys. They've been doing it for a long time. And you worry about the egotism of that, of saying, oh, I can build a better hamburger at scale. Of course I can build a better hamburger in my backyard, but at scale, all the different things that happen, that's a learning curve that's pretty amazing. So looking at it from a perspective of, is there a niche? Is there a place for me to be able to stick my foot in, be able to make a living? And that's the big thing is how am I going to monetize this to the level that I can make a living? More so for me, it was because I felt like I had about 3 or 4 years of residual income, no debt, that I could get this thing off the ground. And that gave me a lot of fortitude. That gave me a lot of motivation. But so all the profits that would come in hired more staff. More staff hired, made the job better, and made the experience of owning a Kona Ice franchisee better. And so that was able to grow without me sitting on top having to take, a couple $100,000 a year to pay my living. And that's where a lot of people get themselves in troubles, is they just need so much money. And in the beginning, so it's tough. You gotta bootstrap it, as everyone calls, and things like, or you get a big investor and you spend their money like it's water. Either way, I wasn't willing to do that. I did have an investor, but I was more conscious about his money than I was my own. So it worked at the end, Chaz, when you get down to it and you start seeing the horizon. And I remember thinking, the first 3 or 4 people that bought trucks were having as much success as I was. And a lot of times I'm a good salesperson. I'm a talker. I could walk into a school, a little league, whatever. I could get the account. I could get it. But when people that were like not me were coming in and being successful, this guy down in Georgia had come in, and he wasn't A-type personality, and he's driving neighborhoods making $200 or $300 a day, and he's like, hey, I'm surviving. And then he gets one event, and then another, and then another, and then he's like, now he's got the same guy to this day bought truck 20 something, and now he's got 6 or 7 franchises. He's got a coffee franchise. His whole family's employed. The whole thing. And he wasn't an entrepreneur as much as he was a really good small businessman. I would say the entrepreneur in that story would be me. Right. And I'm not being egotistical, like I said, but small business and entrepreneur, 2 different things completely.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get to that, because I think that's a whole nother thing that could be very valuable. Let's stay here on this, couple 2-3 years, you're getting started. The nugget that I'm pulling out, though, I want to give it to the listener before we move on, is because you kept your expenses low and you were, basically conservative in the way that you either spent and or needed personally, you were able to grow the business as a business from the beginning before it was maybe a big business. You were doing things to grow it. And so you were spending money where maybe other folks weren't. You were making them look nice, the caliber of people, the caliber of franchisees, the experience of all that. You were investing in that early. What was the snag in that? Because that sounds like a 2 or 3 years of it kind of popped. But what was the behind the scenes? Maybe nobody knew about it. What was the thing that you were really struggling with?
Is that I had to have, in my local operations, I ran 2 or 3 trucks in northern Kentucky, and the local ops used to have to do well so I could pay the payroll of the people sitting in the office talking to the franchisees. That's right. And so I'm working 9 to 5. Working on the franchise part of the business, and from 5 until 10, I'm in a truck, driving the streets, trying to, keep my labor costs down, but also learning the business more so, and doing this. Those are the long days, and my wife always jokes. She said, Tony got into this business so he could spend more time with his family, because I was on the road a lot. And then I started the business, and I was like, I'm working twice
Nothing's
as hard.
changed.
But I was able to put my kids in the truck with me. They just told the story that my youngest daughter, who's 21 now, she was in a car seat in the front of a Kona truck. And I'm driving through the neighborhoods, and people are like, "Oh, she's adorable." And I said, "Yeah, I picked her up at the last stop. I'm collecting children."
I think that was the opposite, Tony, of what you were trying to create, okay?
It was an uncomfortable couple seconds, but then they realized this is my daughter. So I always
Just let it hang in the balance there for
yeah. I kind of like listen. I wanted to be engaging, and I wanted to be different, and I wanted to have that experience. Life is too short, and it's too funny for us not to call those things out. And let's just have. I'm a 40-year-old man driving around an ice cream truck. My buddies are making fun of me. Lamb, you used to drive a nice car, wear a nice suit, and I'm like, it's a pretty nice truck, don't you think? It's a pretty nice truck, and I got a Hawaiian shirt on, so this is a nice suit, and I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm taking a swing, man. And I was making good money. Life has always been. I've been one of those lucky guys. I was always figuring out how to make money because, like you, I could sell, and so if you sell, you can do a lot. You have no inhibitions of talking to people. Or I think that's going back to the vacuum cleaners. What I learned from that is just it's a numbers game. Rejection is part of life, and it's an integral part of it. So I like knocking on 30 doors to get into one house. Selling 1 out of 3. So if you do the math, if you're knocking doors, you got to knock 90 doors to put a commission in your pocket. So let's get started early in the day.
Let's get them all knocked now.
Yeah, let's get them knocked out. So it's tough business, but I looked like this in high school, so I was used to rejection. It's like, oh my God, you want to go out? No. All right. What about your friend?
Yeah, I experienced the same thing in school. There was some gals that I asked out a couple times and got the no, but I even tell that to my wife because we got married pretty young, and we met in high school actually, and I told her that she's throughout all the years of all the rejection, even as we're married, we have a great marriage. She doesn't actually reject me very often, but the reality of it is that that's just part of the game, and that's okay. I was thanking her, really. I was like, look, I'm super tough because I get rejected every day because that's just the way that it works.
That's the way it works. But listen, that's the pain and suffering that he's talking about.
That's right.
Let's get a little pain and suffering in life.
Hey, Kings and Queens, Chaz Wolf. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other grow.
You kind of mentioned something there around mindset. My buddy's making fun of me. I used to drive a nice car. I used to drive, wear a nice suit, but it was different. But you in your mind immediately changed that, or maybe it wasn't immediate. Maybe that's hindsight now. You changed it to, well, I have a nice truck, and isn't it colorful, and isn't my Hawaiian shirt suit nice? And was that internal that was happening to you? Was there a moment in time where you were just like, you kind of felt the weight of your buddies and everyone around you kind of making fun of you, and that, or was it just like from the beginning?
Well, again, going back to vacuum cleaner salesman, I never had a glorious job. I mean, I worked at the Gap. I think that was my most credible job when I was in high school, as I worked at the Gap. And so I never really cared about that. That's another thing. You got to get rid of stuff like that. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you can't hang on stuff like that. You really can't. If you believe in what you're doing, and what you're doing is good and wholesome and moral and has a level of integrity, then you can live there. And at the end of the day, and I know my franchisees come in and they're like, yeah, I'm going from being a computer programmer, or I'm going from being a nurse, or I'm going from being this to I'm going to drive a Kona truck around the neighborhood. And I'm like, yeah, in the very first 30 days, your friends are going to wonder why. But in 6 months from now, you're going to be the Kona lady. You're going to be the person that's like the most popular person in the 8-year-old demographic, you're going to be the most popular person in your community 100 times over. And I've got story after story after story of people saying, I'm the Kona guy, I'm the Kona lady. And I love it because now I'm loved in the community. I'm like, that's a pretty cool place to be.
I think so as well. Let's talk about this small business owner versus entrepreneur. We kind of dabbled on that a little bit, but I guess maybe it probably stems from the question of, can anybody, in your opinion, be an entrepreneur? Is it something that's inherent? Can it be learned? Do people struggle with it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's such a good question. And I struggle with this. I never want to discourage anybody. I always want to be the encourager in saying this. Sure. But listen, you got to know who you are. I think my biggest pet peeve in life, and I've realized this probably in the last 5 or 10 years, is people that aren't self-aware, people that have these nuances in their personality, and they're just so unaware of it. And you're like, come on, man, do you own a mirror? Can you look in the mirror and understand you don't have this skill set? Either work on it or just accept you don't have it and move on. I just get so frustrated. I know what my failings are. I know I'm not super organized. I know I'm not, my thinking scatters sometimes. I work against that. I'll sit down and I'm very intentional with my alone time to put my thoughts together. I come into the office every Sunday night for 2 or 3 hours and lay out my entire week, because you come in Monday morning, you become a pinball and you're bouncing all over the place. And so that's my weakness. So let's work hard against it. So sometimes entrepreneurs, and I'm using that term lightly, and they go in, they say, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to start my business from scratch. Okay, what experience do you have starting from scratch? I think mentorship and internship is so important, and we're missing that in the college education conversation. Is man, get into a mentorship, get around people, get the cost of education is expensive, but it's not always writing the check to the college. A lot of times it's like working for $15 an hour for a company and you're underpaid, but you're learning a tremendous amount. That the difference in what you're worth and what you're earning, that's the cost of education. So look at it as that and make sure you're spending your time realizing, hey, I'm spending a ton of money getting educated here. So I better walk into the office every single day looking for that education because I'm not getting enough money to justify working here. So that's kind of the mentality a little bit. So when I say an entrepreneur is a dysfunctional psychopath, narcissist that thinks he's so smart that he's got a better answer for everything and he's going to do that. I worry about that, but there's so much great room for someone who can follow a narcissist and say, hey, I can do what he's doing. That's why I love kind of franchising, because it's putting the business model out there. It's this distilling of a good business model. You hand them a great recipe book and you say, make it like this and you will do well. Yep. And so I think that's kind of the journey. But no, Chaz, to answer your question, not everybody is an entrepreneur, and I worry that I got asked, I'll say this real quick. I got asked to be on the board of a university and say, our fastest growing major is entrepreneurship. And I'm like, I have a problem with that. I don't think you can teach entrepreneurship at the college level. I think, if you want to focus on mentorship and interns and things like that, yes, but to teach somebody to entrepreneur, in a classroom, I mean, there's some basic stuff, but I think you can get that anyway. Accounting, get some finance, get some whatever, some science. I don't know, but not entrepreneur. It seems like it's a little bit of an oxymoron that we go to a classroom to learn how to run a business. So what I'm picking up, especially since obviously you've got a franchise system, and that was my first business as well, was buying into a franchise system, and so I think that the ability for any personality, background, desire of a person can step into a model like yours and be successful. Yep. And they don't have to have some of those like really exuberant, really loud entrepreneur type either personality traits or characteristics or skills even. They can still be successful doing their own thing. They are an entrepreneur, they are a business owner, but that person's going to have, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 trucks, or in our industry, it's, maybe 1 or 2 locations, retail locations.
And that's about how it goes, right? Like you just look across and it's like, okay, everybody's kind of a onesie and twosie. And then you've got the few that kind of stand out that have the 25 trucks or the,
Right.
150 pizza locations. And those guys, that's kind of how I always kind of thought of myself in that system was, even though I was operating the business, I saw myself as more of an investor or an entrepreneur working on like a global piece as opposed to, this one singular little mom and pop expression, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what I'm hearing you say the difference truly is a small business, you're kind of in it doing the thing versus, building something that's going to be much larger than you at some point.
Correct. And both of those things are noble. They're necessary. They're noble. It's worth the journey. I was in a Kona college. I do a Q&A at the very end of the college. There's a young lady in the front, and she raises her hand, and she's very introverted, and she says, how does somebody with my personality make it in Kona? This is day 4 of college. So we're getting ready to graduate. They're going to get in their truck and drive home. And she says, how do I do it? And I had to be honest with her. I said, I can't speak from that perspective, but I can give you 10 people that are introverted, that are succeeding wildly in Kona. And I got done with that session. I walked up to my office. I got Karen Mowry's email, and I put those 2 women together. And I said, Karen, this is a lady who she's excited about the business, but she's introverted. And Karen is extremely introverted, and she's wildly successful. And she says, a lot of people want to be on the stage, but I love being beside the stage and watching. And I can see the stage, I can smell the stage. This is the kind of thing. She says, but I do my best work on the side of the stage. And I just kind of love that. And those 2 ladies connected, and she's been extremely helpful to her. And so I'm lining those people up because I can't look at her and say, you know what you ought to do, just not be introverted, just be extroverted. Like it doesn't work that way. You should be taller. That's what you should need to be. You should be taller. It doesn't work that way. So put like-minded people together because we're being successful at all different levels of the business, and you don't have to be super psycho, extroverted. It's funny. I watched one of my kids. We have a cookie bake every year, and Christmas cookie bake. And I've got 4 kids. They're so cool, and they're different. Every one of them's different. And the one that I find the funniest, I guess, is over there making cookies. And we all have this competition, and then we eat the cookies, and we say, okay, this is the first number 1 cookies. Everybody tries to bring a different recipe every year. Good competition. And I look over at my son. I'm trying to hide his name. Anyway, he's over there he's pouring flour into the cup. It's overflowing. He throws it in the bowl. And I mean, he's not an exact recipe guy. And I'm talking to him, I'm like, you got to follow the recipe, brother. And he's like, yeah, I am. And I'm like, you are not. There's a heaping mound over top of the cup. You're pouring the vanilla in, you're just pouring it in out of the bottle. He's like, why? It needs a dash of vanilla. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Recipes are meant to be followed. And so I realized that's something interesting about people. And this guy's got, my son's got these great qualities. He's so extroverted. He's so a people person. People love him and drawn to him. He's funny, but doesn't follow a recipe to save his life. And so I wonder about, is he going to be a good franchisee? Is he going to be a good operator? Because I don't know. He might need to be in a different role if he's going to, do the recipes that way. Does that make sense?
100%. I think it's great. We use a system called Culture Index, and we help our clients with it. And of course, I've done it with my wife and all of our friends. And it's interesting when you can understand that nuance right there. You're like, okay, cool. Like you said, even about yourself, I'm not that organized. Does that mean that you just throw up I'm not organized flag and you just lean into being a chaos mess? Well, no, you come in on Sundays and you organize your week to the best of your ability. But because of that, I bet you've put some really organized people around you. And I bet you there's some tasks that are pretty organized, maybe around that accounting stuff that you're talking about, that you don't necessarily touch on a regular basis, but maybe a report is given to you by someone highly detailed, right? That's how we combat these things, as long as we can be self-aware. Sometimes it's an assessment that helps us take that, but sometimes it's a parent, right? Like how many times we've looked at our children and been like, wow, you're really good at this. Or this is an area where we might need some help, following a recipe.
Right. No, I love that about the people, and I just have that microcosm in my own family that my daughter would follow the recipe to the nth degree, and then if it doesn't turn out perfect, she can blame the recipe. She doesn't have to accept the responsibility that, hey, it's not very good. And Jonah has made some cookies that have been like terrible. However, he's won the competition a couple times. And he's like, see? And I'm like, that was luck, brother. That was pure luck.
It was.
There's no skill involved in that. But no, I love that differentiation. So trying to set up a system where everybody can thrive, so you have broad recipes in franchising to some degree. I mean, you got to maintain the brand consistency. We got to live there, and that experience for the customer is going to be good, but the experience for the employee doesn't always have to be the same. The experience for the person in the truck, communications, the operation standpoint, all that doesn't have to be exactly the same. We want the brand promise to be, a safe, great experience for a customer walking up to the truck.
I think that there's a lot of even wiggle room in that type of thinking for someone who's maybe a little bit more entrepreneurial than a small business owner, as we've kind of defined these, can still step into your system, know that there's a brand promise and there's an experience for my customers that I need to deliver on, and that can't be wavered. But like kind of how I go about doing that can kind of be my version. And so I think that you're catering to not just, the operator, but also the entrepreneur who wants to come in and maybe get a little feisty with a couple trucks and do it kind of in their own way. I want to ask you a question about franchising. If someone's listening right now, they've maybe had an idea in their mind around, I'm going to franchise my concept. What would you say to that person? Would you encourage them? Would you say run the other way? If they are going to do it, is there something they should be looking at first? What's your thought?
Well, I think it goes back to the mastermind concept is because if you license it and you make everybody follow your pre-prescribed thing to a T, you're not getting any add to the deal. You're really not getting the mastermind effect. And I think franchising allows more of that. What I realized early on is I don't have all the answers. Real quickly, I realized that there's some people that are much better at this business and at this level than I am. And they've done really, really well. And I don't think anyone can outwork me, but far as, really understanding the customer base, and it's the PTA president and the youth and the summer camp, these people in the community, and that wasn't me necessarily. So they speak that language, and so they could do the business, they could connect better. And I loved bringing that all together so they would be able to teach the rest of the franchise system, hey, here's the way you approach a summer camp counselor. Here's the way you approach a PTA president. Here's the way, these kind of nuances that I didn't have. And then again, back to that mastermind effect, that's what I think franchising does. The problem with franchising, it's very expensive because you have to license through every state. You got to have an FDD drafted. I've got a FDD that started out at 49 pages and now it's probably 400 pages. It was so easy that everyone could understand it. Now it's not as easy to understand. It's reactionary to the bad elements that sometimes get in your system that say, hey, I want to sell blank off the truck. You're like, okay, let's put a paragraph in here that you can't sell blank off the truck, or whatever. So you've got to start monitoring and then the different nuances of the states. Some of the states are very heavily regulated for this. So you've got to, I remember California, I think we added 40 or 50 pages to the FDD just for them alone. And so it became this construct, but it's expensive. And we pay attorneys and you have people that write it and you go through all the stuff. So it's a tough way to start, but it's not. I say that you can write an FDD for your state, you can go and get it approved, and then you can start small. And do that. I had a buddy who was an attorney who said, hey, I can just cut and paste. I'll put one together for you for X number of dollars. This is a true story. He put it together, and he's like, I'll do it for like $5,000 or $10,000. I said, oh my God, thank you so much, because I was getting quotes for like $50,000 to $100,000. So he cuts and pastes it, puts it all together. We send it to the very first applicant. The guy gets an attorney, and they just rip it to shreds. and he comes back, and Alan Griffith is his name, and he comes back, and those attorneys just go back and forth for like a month, and they finally get it all done. And Alan said, yeah, I made about 70 cents an hour doing that. He said, this is a disaster. But he got the core done. Then as you submit it to the states have changes. So we've obviously since then have contacted with lots of attorneys, got it done right. But I spent a lot of the profits of the early days dialing all that stuff in. And so it's challenging to do it that way. But you have to have the understanding is you're looking for help. You're looking for input. If you want to license it and control, or license it actually is less control. Or if you want to keep it all to yourself, and I'm going to open up the next city, and I'm going to hire everybody individually, and I'm going to do that. Oh my gosh, then you really are a narcissist, and you really are a psychopath. That you think you can control people at that level. I just want the input from great people. So
yeah, that concept that you're referring to, the mastermind principle, it's defined in Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's two or more minds working in harmony together unto the achievement of something specific or a definite chief aim, as he says. You just gave a pretty general aspect of how your franchise system has operated in that. But what comes to your mind when you say, like, I operated in the mastermind principle here and it changed everything for me? What's an example for you on that?
Well, my dad probably. My dad was a president of the vacuum cleaner company that I used to sell vacuum cleaners for, and he had kind of retired. I had moved on. We were doing different things, but here's a guy who was in his 70s who was brilliant. And I got to garner and glean off of him from that perspective. But he didn't understand the nuances of today's business as much as he understood the big thoughts of, he ran a huge company. And so I was able to glean that. There's all the people that I hired in the early days were definitely that, because I always hired into my weaknesses. And I always hired into, the accountant, the organizer, the administrator. There's people that have the like you said, the organizational skills or the accounting skills or whatever, that I hired into my weaknesses continually. And that is the mastermind. That's the definition almost of mastermind. And let me even take a step back, and not to throw a shout out. What is it? H. Jackson Brown Jr. or something. He's a famous. I had this thing hanging in my office for years, and it says the keys to success, or the keys to happiness, keys to success. It said, marry the right person. This one decision will affect 90% of your happiness or misery. Yep. And I was very, very lucky in the fact that I married the right person 31 years ago. And the mastermind effect there is her gifts and her skills, this caring, this kindness, this love that she has is almost void in my I don't want to say it that way like I'm a mean guy, but I've heard her work with the kids and say, well, your dad's this way because your dad's a little more terse, whatever the word is, and he's a little more abrupt, and he's a little more, but that's his strength is what has had him be successful in business. He's very direct. He's in your face. He doesn't let things lie. He attacks every point, and she doesn't. And I think going back to the very foundation of mastermind effect is that marry the right person, and then your foundation is set. And then again, going back, and I keep reiterating this too, understand who you are and what you don't have, hire into those things, and let's get this job done.
Yeah, so powerful. I spoke actually with my bride, Julie, a couple months ago. We spoke in Nashville, and our talk was the ultimate mastermind, and we spoke about marriage. And everything that you just said, the detail of that, and how actually the nuances of your differences and also strengths made you each better because you were each there for each other and pressing each other in those ways. And so that's pretty powerful.
Can you imagine, Chaz, us being left to our own devices for this world? I mean, just someone not sitting there who loves you truly, who's speaking into your life like, hey, you're out of control. Hey, think about this again. Look at this from a different light. You've got to have that. And whether it's a spouse or someone that you love dearly or a family member, someone needs to always be able to speak truth. The great emperors of the day had the people that would whisper in their ears, the truth of life. It's important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're 100% right. I've often said that there was things that I've done along the way that, Julie has guided me on. Some things I listened to, some things I haven't. I look back now, I'm like, oh,
yeah, probably should.
Yeah, a couple of those. I try not to do that anymore, but you're 100% right. To have that perspective in that type of environment, because that person knows you just so more, clearly or in depth. But to have those examples in employees or franchisees or other, of course, other mastermind members, whether you're in a group or going to a conference and meeting other people for the first time, like you can have this effect in different ways. But it's about perspective. It's about agitating your thought and seeing things a little different. and being able to adjust accordingly. I got one last question here for you. I got the same question I typically end with, but Tony, I want to know if you had the chance to roll back the clock and you're talking to younger Tony and you just whisper something in his ear just briefly. What do you tell him?
Chaz, that's such a good question. I think I would say, I gotta say personal. I know you want, this podcast is meant sometimes to be business themed, and you'd say, well, do this or do that, and from a business perspective. But from a personal perspective, I would say forgive quicker. You know, you hold these grudges. I would forgive quicker. I would try to be in the moment more. I think I watch people take pictures of everything and never in the moment where they're at, and you're like, man, breathe in the air, enjoy that. And as I get older, obviously that's more important to me, that I'm like, I don't want to take a picture of this and look at it 10 years from now. I want to live it right now. So I think that would have been helpful to be, you know, you're running so fast, you're blowing through things, you're sacrificing relationships, you're sacrificing interpersonal communications because you're just so driven in the early days. And I say all this with a little asterisk on it, because I would also say don't change a thing, because I love where I'm at right now. I love how I've gotten here. I really do. I mean, humility. I mean, I'm a very humble guy, and I say that. Isn't that not the funniest line? I'm a humble guy.
I'm the most humblest.
But when has anyone ever said more humility is not good? It's just, no one's ever said that, because you have to realize who you are in this world. I just keep coming back to that, and the frailties that you have. And I think people guard against them sometimes, and they work to hide those, or they work to overcome those. And the reality is, let's just lean in on those things a little bit. And you know, you're always trying to get better, but the humility of life. The longer I live, the more humility I get, because I realize how much I'm not. Yes, I've got 1,800 franchises and 2 brands that are coming, and life is so good right now. I'm so blessed beyond anything I ever imagined. You know, you remember those times, Chaz, where you're like, I hope if I can get to this amount of money, then I'll be happy. And then, then you set the bar a little higher, you set it a little farther. If I can get to this level of, you know, if I can see the finish line and coast on in. But then and I've been blessed enough to get to some levels, and then you start thinking, well, how can I change the community and the world around me and other people's lives with this? I've got 15 people that work here that are just laying it down. And I'm thinking, if I don't finish this journey without those people having experienced, you know, whatever, being a millionaire or their just ultimate joy in life, then I've failed miserably. I've gotten to a point where I've been blessed beyond anything I imagined. So I say blessed. Me and my sister argue over this. I hate saying blessed, even though I have strong faith. I want to say lucky, because I don't want to say blessed, then other people say, well, I'm not blessed, even though I'm living a moral life or a life of integrity. And so I never want to, you know, discount that. But I do feel there's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of hardworking people. Not every one of those people get to a great place in life. You know, people work hard all the way to the end. People very smart, you know, work all the way to the end and don't experience some of the successes that other people have. So I feel like I'm very lucky to have experienced the success that we've had. I try hard. I be very transparent. I tell everybody what I'm thinking. I'm open to criticism, you know, not too much. I mean, not personal.
I'm only a half narcissist.
I'm losing my hair. I've got a little extra weight on. You know, I say the wrong words sometimes. So just be easy, on the criticism, but very respectful of that. So I've loved the journey. So saying that to the young Tony is, man, don't change a thing, because I love where I'm at right now.
Yeah, so powerful. Yeah, that place of good people not having a good life, or even the opposite, bad people having amazing success.
Right.
Has been an interesting topic, and that's probably for a whole nother podcast. But the truth is that there's success principles, no matter moral standard. And you know, there's good people who just, you know, don't have the right recipe, and maybe there's some luck in there too. I would probably agree with that. There's probably just some cadence there to that cookie recipe that we call success.
that some people are just doing a dab here and a dab there and not measuring properly.
Right.
Tony, you are a man of not only just a lot of success, but a lot of wisdom. And I appreciate you sharing here today. And obviously, if the listener is interested in Kona Ice, you've got 2 other brands coming down the pipe that are in development and growing. If they want to jump in or figure out how to get involved with you, or maybe just even connect with you somehow, how can they find you?
Well, obviously, Kona-ice.com is our main site. Travelin Tom's Coffee it's going to be open to the public. We're only selling it right now. We've sold 150 franchises. We're going to sell another 150 this year, only to Kona franchisees. But October 1st, we're going to open it up to the public and let people buy that aren't Kona franchisees. Then we've got a prototype concept called Beverly Ann's. By the way, Travelin Tom's named after my dad. Beverly Ann's named after my mother. And Beverly Ann, she made the best cookie in the world, so I'm trying to duplicate that as a cookies and ice cream truck. It's doing well in prototype, but we're not ready to sell that yet. But we will. We've got 3 or 4 other brands in concept that we're kind of bringing up the line. We're very good at mobile. We understand what it is. We've got a great success record in mobile. We're going to live there in that space, and we're going to do it better than anybody's ever done it before. With our software, with our marketing, with our support, with our manufacturing, understanding the whole aspect of that. So, reach out if you want me personally, LinkedIn, Tony Lame on LinkedIn. But yeah, come to our websites. Again, anytime you want to get a hold of me is easy. You can come to the website, call the main office. We're here in Florence, Kentucky, the birthplace of shaved ice. This is what... No one knows. Florence, Kentucky.
Oh my goodness, we've got to come visit.
Everybody's visiting these days. It's a great place to be.
Tony, you're remarkable. Thank you for being here. Blessings to you, your family, all the Kona fingers out in the marketplace, and the representation of your brand, but also just the joy and happiness that you're bringing to people all over. So thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate you.
Chaz, I loved it. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.